Good evening. Welcome to Tuesday, April 13th, 2021, Spencerport Board of Education board meeting. I'd like to start the meeting with the pledge to the flag. Please join me.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session to discuss the employment of a specific individual.
First, Mr. Bracken, second, Mr. Givardo. All in favor? 7-0. Thank you. So a little unusual. Usually we start the meeting with the pledge and opening, but we had an executive session. Therefore, the meeting was technically open at 5:30. We went directly into executive session. So you're going to miss out on the pledge to the flag. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion that we amend the agenda to include as the first item 2 resolutions which relate to our superintendent search.
First is Stone, second Kate. All in favor? 7-0. Okay, so thank you for that. So our first agenda item is a board resolution that is, sorry, Spencerport Central School District Board of Education. Whereas, after a diligent search for a new superintendent of schools, the Board of Education of the Spencerport School District has selected Kristin Swann to serve as our new superintendent of schools. And whereas Ms. Swann has accepted the board's offer of employment to serve as a superintendent of schools, and now therefore let it be resolved that the Board of Education hereby appoints Kristin Swann as its new superintendent of school effective July 1st, 2021, upon the terms and conditions of employment as set forth in the negotiated employment agreement. So with this, we have to take a roll call vote. So we will go around the room and vote yes or no to this. Oh, sorry, a motion. Pass resolution. Kate, second. Lori, all in favor for the motion? 7-0. Okay, that was the motion for bringing up this resolution. So the first name on the list is Kevin Hutton. My vote is yes. Mr. Kincaid? No. No. Mr. Bracken?
No.
Ms. Zarnecki?
Yes.
Mr. Givardo?
Yes.
Mr. Maselli?
No.
Ms. Stone?
Yeah.
The votes are 7 yes.
No.
4 yes. And 3 no. The resolution passed. Our next resolution. Whereas the Board of Education and Kristin Swann negotiated and agreed terms and conditions for employment agreement consistent with New York State education law and other legal requirements. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education, number 1, approve the employment agreement negotiated by the parties, and number 2, authorizes the board president to execute such employment agreement. So I need a motion for this resolution. First, Mr. Zarnecki, second, Mr. Givardo. Okay, another roll call vote. Kevin Hutton, yes, to the contract that was negotiated. Mr. Kincaid? No. Mr. Bracken?
No.
Mr. Zarnecki?
Yes.
Mr. Givardo?
Yes.
Mr. Maselli?
Yeah.
Ms. Stone?
Yeah.
The resolution passes, 4 yeses and 3 noes. So Ms. Swann is in attendance. So can you please join us? So I would like to welcome you to the Spencerport School District. And I look forward to a long career with our district and look forward to great things that will happen in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me tonight. I look forward to the same things. I look forward to our partnerships and our service to the community and really helping our children grow and thrive in our schools. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. With that, on for meeting. Privilege of the floor?
There are none.
There are none. Thank you. Thank you. So consent agenda, we see there's a amendment, so promotion.
That's your question.
Questions on consent agenda?
So, the motion to approve the consent agenda, to the cash. The second. Yeah, to the cash.
Okay, thank you. So Maselli, Zarnicki, all in favor? 7-0. Thank you so much. So Board of Education reports. What I want to share is that the district search for our next superintendent was very deliberate, very long, very carefully thought out. Lots and lots of conversation that occurred, many more meetings than we ever had anticipated to come up with what we feel is the best for our district. I want to thank all of the candidates that had come forward. We had a lot of great conversations, great interviews. And even though, as you heard, that the vote was 4-3, what we do have is a great Board of Education here that whether that vote went one way or another, there is commitment from everyone on this board to fully support Ms. Swann as our new superintendent. You will hear that from every member of our board, that we are so fully supportive of it. So the other thing I want to share is later in our meeting, we're going to hear from Dr. Kissel, our trials and tribulations of opening. Again, that is something that the board has been involved with. We've been reading and reading and reading, and we've been seeing what our community is looking for. We understand, but for every step forward, it seems like we are pushed back 3 or 4 steps. And with all the emails that went to everyone, you've seen that with our intentions, with our plans, with our hopes to be able to open up 6 through 12 on Monday of next week. And that will not be occurring based on the new guidelines that were submitted. So that's what I have as a board president's report. Mr. Kincaid.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hunton. I do have a couple items tonight. Number one, I'd like to give a quick, big shout out to our Ranger robotics team that placed 3rd in the world competition this year. And of course, during the pandemic, it's been a very challenging year for our students, but a big shout out to our leaders, our mentors, our volunteers, and most importantly, our students for placing 3rd in the world this year in the virtual robotic competition. Just want to give a quick shout out. Last week was was National Assistant Principals Week. Just a big thank you to all our assistant principals here at Spencerport. I think sometimes we don't hear too much from assistant principals, and the amount of work that they do on a daily basis to support administration and most importantly our students and our school. It's just incredible the amount of work that they do, and I really appreciate everything that our assistant principals bring to our school district. So a big shout out to them. The next thing I just wanted to say is from what I've gathered from some community members and some staff members here in the district, that elementary reopening this week has gone very, very smooth. Of course, we know that's a heavy load for a lot of people, and I know there's some key players sitting in this room tonight. I just want to sincerely thank you for everything that you have done to make this work. And this has been ongoing change for all of us. And the amount of work that you all have done on a daily basis to support our learning community is amazing. And I sincerely thank you for everything that you have done. And I continue to look forward to hearing more great things about the reopening. So to all of you, thank you. Really appreciate it. And the last thing is tomorrow afternoon, there's a COVID response team meeting. I'm looking forward to joining that tomorrow afternoon so we can continue to move forward with our plans, not just this year, but also our plans going into September. That's it. Thank you.
Bill?
I don't have anything.
Just two things, met with the Rotary meeting on Tuesday, and they just went over their upcoming summer events. Met today with Mr. Salzberg to discuss code of conduct changes, and those are being worked on right now.
The Monroe County School Board Association Ledge Affairs group got together last week. Out of that, there was a lot of discussion, obviously, because the day before was when the budget hit and all the information started coming out about the different funding. Two things, though, that are kind of more actionable. One is, and I brought this up probably 6 months ago, there's an opening with what we've been through over the past year and a half. The regents themselves have opened the door and said, look, we don't have to, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, we don't necessarily have to go back to doing everything the way we used to do it. Let's take a look at what worked in this environment, what changes we should be making to how public education is done in the state of New York. You know, that, and they opened the door to everything from the regents exams themselves through remote learning and all those other things in terms of how we might open those opportunities up to better enhance education versus just doing a snapback to the way it was supposed to be. So we need to figure out a way for us to engage in that conversation. I've obviously had an anecdotal conversation with some teachers and administrators, but we need to kind of coalesce and get some ideas, big ideas, not little in the weeds things, but some big ideas that can be floated out there for people to start working, machinating over. So, the second, well, in that same vein, with the new legislature that we have in Albany, we do have an opening. There are some new people, there's new blood, there's a little bit of new energy. And there's obviously some fun things going on in Albany that are opening the door to things. But we need to take advantage of that. And so I would encourage that in some way we invite the representatives for our district into our buildings, do some tours, do some conversations with those folks, get them to know us, get them to understand the challenges that we face, and start building that relationship with them. There was, like I said, there were a few other things, future state highway. The other thing is we're doing the COVID working group right now to figure out, you know, getting the tactical done. But we need to start also inside of that, doing some kind of hot wash on what happened, how did we respond, what steps were really good steps, what were some missteps, because this isn't going to be the last time something like this happens. So the better we can capture that information, get it down in black and white someplace, and internalize it to some degree, the better, more prepared we'll be for the next time, the next pandemic, the next emergency that comes along. So those two big actionable items, I think, are things that we should be trying to tackle as a district.
So, Pam, what do we have to do along with what Gary was just talking about? I was at that meeting when Trustee Norwood and the other guy's name, I'm bad, I can't remember his name. But they did, as Gary said, open the door of can we change regions? Can we bring it up? I think we as a district ought to be doing that. So I guess this is a charge to Pam. Just another little thing on your pile. let's figure out who needs to be at that table and what does the district propose? What would the ideal scenario in the future be? I think that would be something that's definitely worth our while. Do we agree? I think you got head nods here.
Well, I think there's the COVID and what we've gone through and what we've learned from it or will continue to learn from it. And I think that's essential. I think looking at any school district and how we move forward for continuous improvement is something, also what are some things that we may have done now that we would want to continue. But we plan to work with our principals actually on the 28th and talk about, in order to improve your schools, what are the things that you think you'd like to see differently, you'd like to move. And I think that would include discussions around what are some things that we've done that have informed us, maybe changed us. And certainly also looking for opinions of other educators, even beyond Spencerport, as to what are opinions that they might have that impact how education may change now and in the future. So I think all of that are steps that are important to take.
So I think with the regions, I think we gotta strike while the iron's hot on that one, because it is up in the air right now. And so I think what we want to do is something sooner than later. Not that we want to include all of that, but I think right now, just broad strokes is what we probably need for that. Do you agree, Gary?
Yeah, and we're not gonna be doing this alone. It's, the districts that are engaging from across Monroe County and stuff to do this, and the association is engaging to try and lead it.
Yeah.
And guide it. So, if we can get some larger picture items and stuff, certainly locally, we want to do more in-depth dive and stuff, but let's get some things for those folks that make policy and things in Albany, give them something to think about and what they really should be trying to focus on versus just, like I said, snapping back to normal.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So Gary and I attended labor relations 2 weeks ago. The topic that was covered there was the Monroe County School District's Health Consortium. They talked at length about the health of the organization overall, trends that they've seen as a result of COVID. Very high level, the plan is doing well. The projections as far as how claims are coming in kind of are falling in line with what they anticipated. It was more of an informational thing about the health consortium and really its well-being financially as well. Some things they're doing to drive efficiencies and drive improvements while driving down costs. A lot of good stats there, and we're 100% surrounded by health. So the next thing is I run audit committee earlier last week or this week, where we selected a new external auditor. We interviewed 3 different audit firms. Came in the end, Jerry and I were the 4 members represented, but there were 6 other members of the audit committee that work predominantly in accounting. There were CFOs there, there's controllers there for large organizations. Yeah, the audit committee unanimously decided to go with Mengel. It wasn't even in my opinion, and this is very, it's not my area of expertise, but it wasn't even close. Mengel had a very strong proposal. I can hand out, this is part of the handout that they handed out. It was a unanimous decision, and I support the decision of the audit. Thank you. Gary, you want to answer you there to both of us?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that Mengel did that the others didn't even come close is they were already engaged before we asked them a question. And not just with us, but with the other districts that they represented. They were already engaged in reading through all that stuff that had just come out that day, basically. And we're basically providing guidance and thoughts and things for districts to start considering and keep in mind because they knew that we're in the middle of budget season. So they were so far ahead of the game already. So yeah, it wasn't, I don't think it was even much of a discussion. It was pretty solid.
Yeah, so Nangle, this is for external audit, Nangle's Thompson. Just, that's.
Oh, they were together, so it's.
So we know.
Current firm, but we gave a fair shake to the other two firms.
Because they sent it to me. Okay, that's awesome. Kate, any report? Okay. The next thing on Board of Education is unofficial review of the 2021-22 Board of Education meeting dates. Any red flags or anything pop up that are of concerns? So we had to wait till the Monroe County and the school calendar was updated before we sent this out. It looks like our generic every first and third Tuesday, so no motion needs on this. Okay, so that is our official review. Okay, now some great information is going to be shared by Dr. Kissel now. Practical stuff out.
I would just like to give a quick little update on opening. Greg mentioned K through 5 did, new and old students met each other for the first time on Monday. All of the cabinet, extended cabinet were at schools. We divvied up all of us to the 4 different schools and with the principals. I think the biggest thing at first is traffic and flow, and they've done a lot of work to prepare for that. But it was a little bit of rain. Kids were getting out of their cars if they were getting dropped off or off their buses, and the smiles and the hugs. And I'm watching today at Munn, the kids outside playing and they're hugging each other and happy, and maybe I'm not supposed to say they were hugging each other, but they were happy to see each other. How's that? It was exciting. We've obviously done a lot of conversation with the principals around how did things go. To a person, they're proud. The teachers look happy and proud. The teachers that are teaching who may have been RTI teachers or reading teachers, and now they're classroom teachers for the first time. What a lift that was for them. I want to recognize them when we get to the end of the year for the extra lift that they did. And even within the first couple of days, they're saying, wow, this is something really special, and feeling good about what they've done and what they are doing. So I think, during these challenging times, you have to remind yourself what's going well and what they're happy about. And certainly I think this is something to be happy about. Of course, at the same time, we had lots of hopes for reopening 6/12 on Monday. At this point, we have to continually look at some factors before we make that leap. I regret that this is where we are. We kept looking and looking for the way in. And people like, well, why didn't you do some of these things before? I think we can look with hindsight that at the beginning, when plans were made to open school, a lot was unknown about this virus and what it would mean and what would the safety of our students and our staff. So you can't just take this point in time and say, why didn't you do it at that point in time? It has been this constantly evolving, dynamic, ever-changing situation. And that's not what humans are particularly comfortable with. And so, I apologize if this is how things have been going. I wish I had a magic wand, but I didn't get one. So we're going to keep working together. I want to emphasize the together here. February 8th was the first time that principals and our whole extended, we had the ad hoc committee for the first time under Ty's leadership. And it took us from February 8th to Monday to make the plans that now are in place. And so it was an effort together. And I think everybody feels proud and good about that. I want Danielle and Tim to share a little bit of information because all of this health information evolves And it is what undergirds the decisions that we are making and the responsibilities we have as leaders of the school about when it is safe to return students. No matter how badly we want this, I think we do have to attend to what are new guidelines, and so the language is even stronger. So thank you to both of you, and I appreciate you sharing some information with us.
Thank you, Dr. Kissel. Good evening, everyone. That was obviously very well said, Dr. Kissel. That's really the goal of our presentation today, is really just to provide an overview of where we are with our reopening efforts, to capture some of the data that went into the decision making, to unfortunately have to postpone the decision to bring our 612 students back 4 days a week, but also to really highlight really the success of this week, which took place on Monday, right, where our K6 students were able, or excuse me, our K5 students were able to come back in person. So the last time that Danielle and I were here was March 9th. And that was to provide an update on the CDC guidance. And that was the most recent guidance that we had received in many months. And many districts were looking to that CDC guidance on future plans to increase in-person instruction for our kids, right? Because that's been our goal all along, is what can we do to increase in-person instruction for our students? And that continues to be our goal. And within that CDC guidance, it listed a number of different mitigation strategies the district should follow. We'll touch on those again during the presentation tonight. But it also talked about community transmission. So we want to revisit that as well and give a snapshot in terms of where we are with community transmission and how do we define the community. But even since that time, we know that that work has continued, right? There's been a number of different efforts to seek additional guidance from the state and at the state level around reopening. And during that interim, as a school district and as a learning community, we needed to go back to the New York State guidance from August to examine that in detail, and as Dr. Kissel alluded to find what were those avenues that we could take to increase in-person instruction using guidance back from August. And at K-5 level, that was using that cohorting process that planning started back on February 8th. And then at the 6-12 level, it was to increase the physical barriers. So if there was a distance, a social distance less than 6 feet, those physical barriers needed to be installed. So that's where we were. And we had those plans in place and we were ready to go until this document, the updated New York State Department of Health guidance that came out on Friday evening of last week. And essentially, the new New York State guidance adopted the CDC guidance. And the difficult decision to postpone opening 6-12 really had to do with this language within the CDC guidance. And it really focused on that county being in a high transmission area, where our elementary schools can maintain a physical distance of 3 feet. However, our middle schools and our high schools, it could only be 3 feet where cohorting is possible. But when cohorting is not possible, they need to go back to that 6 feet of physical distance. What we were banking on before, right, is the use of those physical barriers when 6 feet could not be maintained. However, New York State adopted the CDC language around no longer recommending physical barriers where a physical distance of 6 feet cannot be maintained.
And can I interrupt here? The word must is the one that has really called us to review here. It isn't to the degree practicable, it says must.
It's not a recommendation.
So I just, when people want it to be different, I just need to reinforce that particular word is a game changer.
And the other piece too, right, is that our county is in that high transmission area. So I'll turn it over to Danielle to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of go over the things, some of the things that we discussed at the last meeting that we had with you guys. But the CDC identifies 2 indicators for community transmission. And those include the total number of cases per 100,000, as well as the percentage of positive tests during the last 7 days.
So where do we stand as a community here in Monroe County? So right now, as of today, at 5 o'clock, we are at 246 cases per 100,000. So that is 2.5 times, approximately 2.5 times what we need, where we need to be in order to open schools. Because currently we're in this red transmission zone. The positivity rate is 3.2%, which is down here in this low or blue transmission. And the CDC guidance says that if there's any discrepancy in the transmission rates, we have to take the highest one. So what does this mean for our schools? As Tim alluded to, at the elementary school, we're able to cohort students so they can maintain the 3 feet. At our middle and high schools, due to the schedules that all of our high schoolers and middle schoolers maintain, we're not able to cohort. So therefore, we do need to keep that 6 feet of social distance. Now, when we move into this orange level here, that is when we can decrease down to that 3 feet at the middle and high school level. And so we ask ourselves, what do we have to do to get to that orange level? And what we need to do is we need to have a transmission, that top number that I talked about that is now 246, we need that to be below 100. So we need that to be in this area here. This is not a problem down here. It's this up here that's a problem. So we need the community's help to get these kids back. We obviously, when we spoke on March 9th, at that time we were discussing numbers of 110 to 120. So obviously that's considerably higher now. And our positivity rate at that point was 1.6, and now we're up at 3.2. So it's doubled. I'm gonna turn it back over to Tim.
See, Mr. O'Connor, so one thing, and I'm just saying that I'm here, I speak for myself, is unfortunately, you guys have to look at county information. People are saying, but in Spencerport, which is our community, we're here, and you're using the county one, which is exasperated because it's the county. And some people are saying, well, but our community should be good, but I know they're saying the stuff in here is county, not Spencerport community.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And so when we say we have to look at community transmission, how do we define a community?
Exactly.
And so in the CDC, the community is defined by county,
Yeah.
and not the local school district. So we look.
I'm sorry. With that, has there ever been conversation or discussion about looking at zip codes that school districts serve instead of just looking at Spencerport, more looking at zip code areas? So
We've looked at that as well.
Okay.
So we have the number for 14559.
Or
So on the county dashboard, there's the different trackers on the dashboard, and there is a breakdown by zip code. And as of this morning, the 14555 zip code was over 200 cases per.
I think it was,
Really?
I think it was actually 272 cases.
Yeah.
And 14559?
It was.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was just updated yesterday, I believe, which previous to that, it was lower.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Danielle, when you say it was lower, when, do you know when off the top of your, I mean, I'm not looking to
So the
give you a
count,
difficult question, but you said it was lower. How much lower and about when? If you know that off the top of your head.
so even last week, so I want to say, I think that they updated every Monday.
Right.
Yesterday, when I looked at it early in the day, it was in that, they do it in shades of blue.
Right.
It was in a lighter shade of blue than it is today.
Okay.
Which in today, it puts us almost at the top of of those blue transmission areas.
Okay.
So Tim, if you go back a couple of slides,
So this one or previous.
keep going back there. In counties of or with high transmission rate, that's what it says.
Yeah.
It's right through that statement. That's where it binds us. And that's where it also says in a couple paragraphs above that these recommendations from the CDC are required. So that language is what's really tying our hands here is county right there and a couple paragraphs before that screen capture, it specifically says these recommendations are summarized below and are required to be adhered to by the responsible parties, which is the school district.
Can I ask a question a little bit on that slide? It talks about how barriers are no longer recommended, but it goes on to say a preferred approach is enhanced ventilation and air filtration. Have we looked into whether we can meet any guidelines that might be out there regarding that aspect of things?
I think Rick could speak a little bit about that. We have explored.
Yeah, I mean, big picture, Lori, we've met with Labella. They performed a study
Right,
for
is this
us.
from
Yeah.
at the beginning of the year?
Yep.
Okay, yep,
And we've met, we've met with Joe and his team as well.
Right.
Nelson, we've upgraded to BER 13 filters for
Yep.
those that can handle it. Our HVAC systems are now 24 hours. So we're doing everything that we can, given the systems that we have. I think really, part of this later in the presentation, when I speak of the budget, it may be something that we look at through using federal stimulus funds.
To upgrade the systems,
So, pardon me?
all to
Not
upgrade.
necessarily upgrade systems, but more of a air purifier type.
Okay, okay, yeah, upgrade, yeah,
Yeah.
alters.
So Laura, I asked Nelson that exact question about a year ago, less than a year ago. And he gave me a very long and very detailed answer, broke it down by building.
right.
And the long and short of it is we just do not have the facilities in place to jump through the hurdles that we have. And the problem is, and the other problem is making these changes, you all know, I mean, like capital projects takes 3 years.
Oh, yeah, I didn't.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's just, with the facilities we have, it's not.
Okay.
Like I said, that's the paraphrase. I had a discussion, and then very long and very detailed. Thank you for getting Nelson for something about how this is. It was, believe it or not, it was more so at high school and middle school versus something else.
We are encouraging people to have their windows open now that it's spring.
Mhm.
That's a huge asset in mitigation.
All right. So our current reopening plans, as we alluded to earlier, we opened with our 4-day and remote models at the elementary level yesterday. And then obviously we're pausing at the secondary level. And we are going to evaluate this weekly and determine, I evaluate this daily and give everyone an update that wants it. But once we move to that orange zone, then we will start discussing getting the kids back. We're ready. We have everything in place to do it. We just need that orange category. We're going to continue the mitigation strategies that we've utilized all year, which has led to zero transmission within our schools. The universal masking, and respiratory hygiene, social distancing, the daily health screenings, cleaning practices, and collaborating with the Monroe County Health Department. I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Great, thanks, Danielle. And really just wanted to capture some of the celebrations with our elementary reopening and the effort that went into that. And really, here's some examples. Dr. Crystal referenced it was a rainy morning, but the spirits were very, very high on Monday this week as students were welcome back 4 days in person. Kudos go out to our Buildings and Grounds Department for all the movement they did to prepare our physical spaces for welcoming students back. Our transportation department has done just a phenomenal job making sure bus routes were updated, bus passes were sent to families, and it was all done in a safe manner as well. The daily health screen is now being sent 4 days a week to our K-5 students, and buildings have those processes in the morning to make sure our students are screened, twice the number of students are screened, and really to publicly celebrate the work that's been done by our faculty and staff and all the different buildings and administrators at the buildings. It was a significant lift, and they have done just a phenomenal job preparing their spaces for students to come back. And again, being in the buildings these last couple of days, it's great. That buzz is back. That buzz that we miss, right, is back in our elementary buildings. And we are ready to move forward with what we need to do to have that community transmission level in acceptable spots. So we can welcome our secondary students back in the same manner. And then also planning ahead, right? It's important that we are looking forward to September 2021. And our goal is to be in person 5 days a week for in-person instruction in September 2021. So we are establishing a planning committee that will involve community and learning community stakeholders as a part of that. So I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware that that is part of the planning as well as we look forward to September. So there's been some opportunity for some questions and answers, but we wanted to again provide another space that I think comes up.
I'm sorry to belabor this point. I'm fascinated by the blue map situation. Can you have Mr. Am pull that map on the screen so we can see that map live? I'm curious what it looks like.
Sure.
Where to go?
Yeah,
The website?
sure. I'd have to do a quick Google search.
Yeah.
While they do that, I can ask a question, probably for Dr. Swann, Mr. Zankovich. As far as, this is a question that has come up and I'm sure will continue to come up with alternating Wednesdays. Is there discussion about that? Do we have any capacity? You know, it's a question that continues to be asked as far as getting 612 back in for, you know, any more days is better. So, you know, that's one of the questions that's come up to me. So wondering if you can give insight on that.
When we had our students in grades K through 5 return, part of that whole process was to include teachers that haven't been classroom teachers, and to try to coordinate the curriculum and with remote, the hybrid, and teachers who are new to the classrooms. So one of the commitments we made to them was to provide them opportunities to coordinate those efforts on Wednesdays. It's a little different because the student, again, because of the teachers that haven't been teachers before. And I think, you know, we had discussions about the models, whether, you know, should the high school be 5 and now it can be 4, you know, if we were able to do secondary. And there was a feeling that there should be consistency. So that's where we've been. And I think we wouldn't have reopened yesterday without the coordination with the teachers that are new to those classrooms. I think it might be easy for people to think, well, they can just do it. Why, you know, what's the problem? But we don't typically ask people that haven't been in a classroom to be in a classroom. And I think we owe it to them to give them the time they need to provide the instruction that we would expect them to provide. So that's the answer I get. Yeah.
So here's the chart that you asked for, Dave. So if we look, obviously you can see Ogden and Spencerport, and then using the guide on the left at 272 or greater, the rate per 100K.
Fascinating. Thank you for
It's,
doing that.
yeah, I mean, it's significant. It's jumped
Yeah,
significantly in the last
yeah.
week. We have a loss, so.
So basically, I can't see the color scheme, but it has to be white in order to be acceptable.
Yeah, there's less than 20 cases.
So
And again,
is that lightest blue opening? Or
So
is lightest
that
blue
technically
still?
is what they call unstable, because that's just looking at that area. It's not looking at the entire county. So they,
We're focusing on 14559. That's fun to talk about hypothetically.
thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
Rules specifically say counties, so that might not.
What today's point though is that previously when we were having these conversations, it was, oh, why are we worried about the county when we should be worried about the zip codes in which our children go to school?
Right.
That used to be an argument. It's not anymore.
Right, I mean, I'll tell you the argument that I read on social media today was that we have no cases in Ogden.
Well, there
It
you
was
go. That's
never,
what we're doing.
it was never really an argument for us to go back to school. It sounded good, but it's always been countywide. It's not, they've never had to, when they did the red zone, yeah, they kind of did red zone here and there. But for getting people back into school, it's always been countywide.
Yeah.
It's never been by locality.
Right.
Have a question about the cohorting and if there's any guidance out there in terms of what the numbers need to be in order to be considered cohorted. I know at our middle school, the grades are divided up, I believe, into teams or, I forget if that's what they call them. Is that a small enough group if kids were only going to classes with that particular team? That doesn't qualify as cohorting?
It was, so if that cohort of students traveled together, and even that would be, the safer strategy would be to have that cohort stay put
Right.
and have the teachers travel to them. They don't give it a defined number that should be within a cohort, but it's keeping that group of students together. The challenge lies right in the complexity of our secondary schedules,
Right.
where those students, there's a good chance no two students have the same schedule over a 4-day cycle. And so I know that our secondary administrators and their teams have really been working on what can we do to increase the space. You know, can we set up tents? Can we do this? How many additional classrooms would we need to increase that physical distancing space to 6 feet? And it's
Yeah, we
just,
talked about this on Monday. We met with high school principal, middle school principal, Danielle, Tim, Ty, and Matt. Who am I forgetting? But anyway, what Sean shared was that we would need 21 extra classrooms. And then you'd need the supervision of those 21 extra classrooms just for period 1, for example. You know, I was hoping that maybe, oh, well, if it was 5, couldn't we find 5 extra classrooms? So it's not, we don't have the space or the staff to keep that distance at this point. But I do think, you know, the superintendents from across the county talked today, and this was the first time it came up. What if it's like this in September? You know, I think we've all been had wishful thinking that this virus would go away and it was going to just kind of go down like that. And it hasn't gone down like that because of variants. And I think that's one of the primary factors at play here. But I think we have to look at a lot of other options again, because I think we all agree we can't get to September and have our kids starting what would this be? 2.5 years of this, you know, all of next year.
Right.
So part of that planning is not just the assumption that the virus has gone away. But I think big picture thinking around what are we going to do if the virus is still an issue?
So after hearing your thoughts about what the high school principal about space versus manpower, right? And I guess we'll cross the bridge when we get there. But I guess we can suggest to hire subs, which I know is a whole other issue, right? But we could get bodies in there. It's another conversation, but, and then as far as space, I guess we can cross that bridge, but if we're short 20 human beings, we hire 20 subs.
That's just the high school.
For
Middle
one- for
school,
one
you
block.
have to add potentially up
Another.
to 40.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
numbers,
it's tough to get a sub, now you want, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just,
And then enter the dynamic of what is a sub-4, because it might be 21 for the first period, but it might be something different.
It would be
Different people, different classes, different programs for the second period. So but I think the rethinking of cohorting, rethinking of what a schedule looks like for middle school for next year is the direction or a direction that we need to look at.
change the fabric of the cloth.
What we have now is awesome. But it doesn't work if this continues.
correct, I think we have to have a plan if it were to continue like this, and plans that it isn't like this.
Mhm.
And maybe there's the morphing of things, to Gary's point earlier, that there's things that we would continue to do that we think have worked. So it's this ongoing process of analyzing where we are, what we can do to get students back into school, and where we're gonna be in September.
with this not going away, really looking at how are we going to be delivering instruction over the next year or even beyond that, you know, to Tim's point, are teachers traveling in the building instead of students? You know, that whole mindset, going back to what you were saying before, Gary, looking at what have we learned from this? And accepting that we might be delivering instruction differently. And what are those options?
And I think if you're teaming or co-boarding,
Yeah,
the teachers moving is an option. But when you have high school students with different electives and the
Yeah.
complexity of those schedules,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we're not gonna look at it. I
Right.
mean, you could look at kids that have common schedules up to a certain point and what part of the day would they, I mean,
Mhm.
I think we look at schedules, we look at all kinds of ideas and get input from the stakeholders.
That's a huge, that's rewriting the Constitution right there, that's huge.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, everyone.
Danielle, is this what you expected when you came on board?
Well, you know, I was thinking about it as I'm walking down here and I said to myself, it probably isn't good that I'm having to see the board twice in 2 months. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank
Really,
you.
thanks for all you're doing and your efforts. We appreciate it. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for bringing up, thanks, Tim, appreciate it. Yeah.
So I think we're looking at Jonathan and some review of policy.
All right, I won't take up much of your time. The 1000 series policies, you'll know, I know you'll see me probably at almost every board meeting from now through October.
Yay.
But with the 1000 series, these policies, at least the 1100 and the 1200 were reviewed by myself and Mr. Milgate, as well as myself and Mr. Wood once again in the past week and a half to ensure that they are good to go, at least going back to Erie 1. There is really minimal, if no substantive changes to these. It is really just updating them to fit Erie 1, more concise language in some cases, others just adding reporting of expenditures and contributions. That information was already in new board member packet, but the policy itself is updated from the 1999 version that we had before. There was only one comment from Lori, which I took care of. Otherwise, I didn't see a lot with respect to comments or questions.
You know, Jonathan,
Did anybody read?
yeah, those were a pretty easy read in my eyes, and if I don't feel there's any changes, I won't, unless you want us to say, looks good, looks good, looks good. You know, when I went through those, I did see Lori's one comment with the italics. Agreed with that, but to not over inundate you with information, I mean, if something's already been taken care of, thumbs up. So if you want us, after we look at that, if you want us all to comment that we've looked at it, we can do that.
It doesn't matter, whatever format that you want to do, I will amend my presentation as late as, 2 hours before the board meeting to fit whatever comes in either day of or the night before. But that's fine, however.
Careful suggesting that one.
I
You can have a busy
suggesting-
day.
Right.
Yes, but there will still be 2 more of the 1100 in the next board meeting when we do some more policies. There were 2 policies that are really Spencerport specific. They're not Erie 1 policies. So that'll take a little more reading to go through, like principles for board members and relationships with principals and administrators and superintendents. Those are Spencerport specific policies, so it will take a little bit more reading than just turning it right over to Erie 1.
So we're shooting to have that for our next board meeting?
Try to at least do, there's 31 policies in the 1000 series, and I don't want to overdo it at any board meeting, but I also knew tonight was pretty heavy. Rick and I talked about it with the budget and the reopening, so we just kept it simple.
I did read it, and what I did this time was Rather than looking at the comparisons, looking at all the others, I just looked at the final and okay, I didn't notice anything missing, therefore I felt it was good, so it was right in line, so.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
All right.
This might be a real fast presentation for you.
I didn't want to get up and say any questions.
I counted that.
I know. So, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Now it's Rick's turn.
So any questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Slide 5.
Just one.
All righty. So remember when you guys used to put me after really exciting presentations with kids and all that stuff? Now I get to go after policy, so. Anybody need to get up, anybody need to get up and stretch, just, you know. So, thank you, for tonight. We are gonna, have you guys approve the budget and the propositions. Remember that you're approving, this is a spending plan. This is what the community is voting on. This budget was built on what I'm going to call traditional. So again, it's been interesting to hear the conversation tonight. I don't think next year is going to be anything but traditional. But again, that's what this spending plan does for us. It allows us to make changes on the fly to some degree. I think, as you heard me talk each month on a financial report, every time I think I have a savings in one place, I typically have an expenditure in another. Same thing on the revenue side. Every time I think I'm going to gain money here, I lose money somewhere else. So that's what it is. This is an estimate of what we think is going to happen throughout the year. Lastly, I just want to thank, there's quite a few members of the budget focus group here as well as online. I want to thank them. They were very helpful throughout the process. And Sue and Rob, I did ask Corey where the camera and microphone were, so that hopefully you're only going to get my good side and hear my voice. Okay, so a lot to cover tonight. And before we do get into those things, let's just take a look at what we've done. So on February 9th, I came and shared with you the revenue side of this budget, and you can see the different things that we addressed. On the 23rd, you spoke, and I got your head nod on the tax cap. You talked about the exclusions. On March 9th, again, came back, gave you a little bit of a revenue update. And then we really focused on general support and transportation expenses. And you can see the different areas or sub-functions within each. On the 23rd, our last meeting, we finished up the expense side with instruction and then what they call undistributed. And then we sort of did a budget summary to show what would have to happen next. Now we're going to go through all that again. So, big picture right now, you can see that what we're proposing for revenues, including reserves, is 87,434,885. It's a over a 3.4% increase, about a little under $2.9 million. So some of the changes that were impacted from the last time we met was there was a slight change in our debt service, which impacted the capital exclusion. I went through, looked at local sources, just looked at trend line data. These are slight changes. I think overall it was $21,800 difference. But again, just trying to align those with what historically we've done. State aid we're going to get to in much more detail, but obviously there was an increase. Federal aid, there's actually a decrease, at least as it relates to what was presented to you. Okay, we'll get into that in the upcoming slides. And lastly, how do we balance the budget for this and the use of fund balance and reserves? So this slide really is just to confuse you. It's really what I'm trying to share with you is when the legislative budget came out, I think the news was districts got a slew of money. And if someone were to look at this and say, oh my goodness, Spencerport has 11.2% more than what they're slotted to get this year. But the numbers vary. There's always detail behind the numbers. If you look, So we adopted the 2021 budget. This output report we received, that's what I used for our monthly financial report. You can see that that's coming in at one number. In January, when the governor came out with the executive budget, you can see that his projection was a little bit different than what we were receiving, in part because state aid runs don't include urban suburban aid. The legislative budget came out, and again, they take a look at what we're slotted to get in the current year. You can see that even that is different from what we're doing, and then what it is we're looking to get. What they've also done is, if you recall, in the governor's budget, he included the second federal stimulus within there. So what he did was he pulled money out of the general aid and then he plugged it back in with federal stimulus. That's changed, and we're going to go over that in a few minutes. So what we're proposing, and after an analysis of what I've done for the state aid, I'm proposing only an 8.44%. Only 8.44%. At 39,516,000. A large part of that is coming from foundation aid. And just so you know, to make us whole, we have to get another $4 million to make us whole if it were to have run the way it normally would have. I don't usually focus on that because the numbers are what they are, and that's what we're getting. The plan is, at least my understanding in reading through this, is that over the next couple of years, they're going to make districts whole. So that's encouraging news. But really, let's focus a little bit on, within the state aid run, they had what they call universal pre-K. For us was a little over $485,000. As I learned more about that, I've never seen it before. It's brand new. They're opening this up to districts across New York State. That is actually, and we're going to get into that, but that is what they call a grant in aid. It's not, even though it's on the state aid run, it's really not part of our state aid. Okay. They've done the same thing with the 2 federal stimulus packages. Any questions on the state aid? We're going to get into federal aid in a heartbeat. Okay, so for federal aid, again, for universal pre-K, it's reflected on the state aid run, but it's accounted for in a special aid fund. What that means is that we have to apply for the funds. I don't know what that entails. Ty and his team can probably already tell me what those details are. I think they are chomping at the bit to see how we can move forward with this. I'm being a little bit more cautious because I don't know what the implications are, and I'm still trying to reconcile how they got the numbers. It's really based on enrollment from last year and then this year. They got all sorts of, it's a percentage of one. So still trying to work through that, but we will. And as soon as we know more, we've already had the discussion at Cabinet about keeping current with this information. Federal stimulus, just wanted to give you a little bit of a timeline of what's occurred. So in March of 2020, they had the what we commonly refer to as the CARES Act. Okay, that's reflected in the current year budget for us. It's about $611,000. It's already been approved. We're working towards getting reimbursement. Even though it's part of the general fund, we have to claim the money a little bit differently. So I work closely with our district treasurer, Nicole, to do that. And we used all of that in this year. There's no impact on 21-22. In December of 20, the CCRSA Act came in. This is the money that, for us, where the governor and his executive slotted that in as part of our aid package. Again, what they've done is they pulled that out, that's separate money. I'm currently trying to understand all the legislation and review the legislation to determine how that can best be used. I have, again, the allotment is 3.4. I'm still trying to determine, I have a question mark. I think it's 3 years, but I'm not quite sure. So again, as that legislation comes down, I'm attending 2 webinars tomorrow, one for the New York State School Boards, the other for the New York State Association of School Business Officials. Hopefully they'll be able to provide more detail on this. And again, this is accounted for in the special aid fund. So the real question with not only the December 20, but the March of 21, is this money going to be supplemental or is it going to be supplanted? So that's going to be key in how we are able to use these funds. So with the legislative budget, they came out with the allocation of the American Rescue Plan, both the CCRSA and the ARP are based on our Title I numbers. Okay,
Wait, right, go ahead.
I'm on a roll. So within, our allotment is $4.9 million. I'm fairly confident it's over 3 years. There's certain minimum requirements. And again, the one piece that I think a lot of us are trying to get our hands on is this, what they call the learning loss portion of this grant. For us, it's about $904,000. Shared some information with Ty already so that we can begin prepping for that. But there's very specific uses of this. So for instance, you must spend 14.286% on after-school or extended day activities. Again, I am confident that Ty and his team are going to come up with ways to meet the instructional needs of our kids to make this happen. Because quite honestly, I don't know that we have after-school or extended day programs right now. I don't know what that means. This is a lot of information that has not been disseminated to many of us. So yes, we have a number. How we need to use that is still TBD. Dave.
I was gonna ask a stupid question. You said the money was either supplanted or something. What was the word you said?
So you either, yeah, so if it's supplemental, okay,
Yeah.
I mean, you can, it either has to be new money, so you're supplementing the current instruction, or you can supplant it. So in other words, if we've designated certain dollars towards something that qualifies within these grants, I don't have to spend it. So we're going to see a surplus in the general fund, and we're able to use that. That's really going to be key. It really is, because the concern here is what that fiscal cliff, right? If we're having to do all these new programs, what happens when that money goes away? We are now stuck with, I'm going to imagine, some pretty phenomenal instructional programs, or, so how do we then maintain that within our general fund budget? That's what we need to be careful of. That's why long-range planning is so critical. Matter of fact, I had an hour-and-a-half conversation with Dr. Timms today, addressing many of these different things.
So Rick, the 904,000, is that spent yearly or over 3 years?
I believe it's over time.
So, okay. Because right now, if that was 904,000 a year, that'd be like 150,000 for after school and 150,000 for summer. But you're saying that could be split into 3 years. That's an opportunity.
Yes. Yep.
But also, you can spend $50,000 in summer stuff like that.
So the American Rescue Plan, is that going to be like the CCRSA where they're giving but taking? So
No.
is it, so it's gonna be above and beyond?
Yep. So it's a great point, Kevin, and I should probably highlight that a little bit more. This was where the governor pulled money away from our state aid, and then he put that money back in. So, hocus pocus, right? These two are grant and aids. They're specific. They're outside of the general fund budget. And we have to go through a very different process. We have to actually, my understanding is that the SED will come out with a portal near the end of February, or I'm sorry, April. My understanding is that much of this has to be in place by July. So there's a very short turnaround time. And you have to account, as we get more understanding of this, you have to put in that portal how we're going to spend it, how it meets instructional needs. You can ask Ty about our ESSA process. He loves it. It's his favorite thing to do. So it's pretty intense. Everybody still awake? This is riveting.
Hey, Rick,
Yes.
what's the, how formal is the requirement to speak, to seek public comment? So, I mean, is that, do they give you direction on how we have to do that, or is that?
I have not seen any direction on how to do that. My sense is, we may have to form a committee. We'll definitely have to post it on the website. It may be as simple as just posting it on the website and say, we welcome public comment. I really don't know at this stage.
I've read as much as I can about this, everything out there. And besides that, bullet points up there, it's about all those ones.
Okay, so big picture again. I just like to use this because it tells me, and hopefully it tells the community and the board that there's really nothing out of line here that we should be concerned about, other than, again, so as a dollar and a percentage, they're very similar. So that's it on the revenues. Let's talk a little bit about expenses. Again, back in March, after the last meeting, we had a budget of 87.8 million. We've gone through, sort of scrubbed the budget, looked at just about everything under the sun, and we were able to reduce that budget by 418,000. So again, 3.343% or 2.9 at 87,434,885. So how did we get there?
Great.
Yep.
Go back to the page.
Yeah.
You really gotta make that font smaller. Keep going.
You sure? Okay, so what did we do to get where we're at? And again, I know this may be a little bit more into the weeds than you need to be, but I think it's important, especially this year. So under the general support, there were two functional areas that we adjusted. One is staff, that was Jamie's area. We saw a little bit of an increase there, in part because there was a reduction in staffing under central services. In order to meet the needs of some of that work, we had to adjust some hours. Within central services, again, this is normally what happens, is we go back and we go to Nelson, okay, what are the things that you think you can do without? And we looked at making a reduction of equipment. So the majority of that equipment is cleaning equipment, okay? It's not this. So you'll see later on, we are still looking to make the purchase of the lift truck. And then reduction of small building level projects. I've already shared with Dave Kayaza. He is probably gonna, he's heartbroken because this is the third year that I've denied replacing a rug in his library that he so desperately needs. But there's other projects. Another project that we took out was building a partitional wall in a music room over at Taylor. So again, these are some of the things that we're going to forego to get to where we need to.
We can't keep doing that year after year.
I get it, but if that doesn't go, then something else will. And quite honestly, we've stayed away as much as we can from instruction, and we've tried to, maintain positions. You know, that was the focus. So some of the other things that we've done under the instruction, under the administration and improvement, we added a BOCE service for the diversity and equity COSER. Within the teaching budget, there were changes. Jamie went through and processed based on enrollment or selection. We were able to see savings of 204,000 there. And for pupil services, again, as we look at these different grants, get them approved, we're able to make adjustments. So I was able to take a portion out of that. We were still meeting a need within a federal grant, so that helped with some reductions there as well. Based on those changes, the only thing that really changed is Social Security, based on some of the changes that we made within each category. What I like to share with you, though, is, this is the same information, but based on the type of expenditure that we incur. Obviously, I don't think it's any surprise. You're going to see, for salaries overall, it's going up 520,000, just about. But this year in particular, you're seeing a larger than normal increase within our debt service and our BOCES. I've shared with you the reason for BOCES. I've shared with you the reason for debt service. Again, I just want to reiterate, I've been working closely with our other financial advisor as it relates to our debt service to help maximize that tax cap exclusion. Any question? And then obviously benefits. And my concern here with the benefits is you're seeing a $945,000 increase. That's with a $433,000 decrease based on TRS. So this picture would be very different if those numbers were going up or at least flat. So again, gives you a big picture of, is there anything glaring that we're seeing or not seeing that helps us gauge where we're at? Again, you can see that the percentages of expense versus proposed are very similar. Obviously, the majority of dollars is in our instruction budget. Any questions before we get into some of the other items for budget development? As many of you know, we're required to produce a budget document that's included with a three-part budget. I think the important thing here is that, again, it's somewhat like the United Way. Under 10 cents of the dollar goes towards administrative, and the majority, almost 75 cents goes towards program, which is a lot of instruction. But you can see on the left sort of the different functional codes of where these get categorized.
So that also, we didn't, 5 years ago, we didn't have to do this three-part.
No, it's been in place for quite a while. Yeah. I don't normally provide this to the board. It's usually during the presentation to the community and that, but again, this year it has been anything but normal. So again, I just thought it was important that you see this.
So that would also trend the same as per 5
Yes.
years ago?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think even when Mike Crum was doing many of these presentations, we were always very proud of the fact that under 10% was going towards administration, and the majority of our funds were going into program. So balancing the budget. Revenue, I shared with you, without the use of reserves, we're at 85.9. Our expenditures are 87. So right now we have a deficit of about 1.4. So how do we go about correcting that? Normally we can look at increasing revenues. You've seen we actually did that with the state budget. But you can see that we decreased expenditures as well. So we're getting closer, but we're not close enough, so that we have to look at our fund balance and reserves. So Laura, you haven't had the pleasure of listening to our reserve plan. Most of you have previously, but reserve funds are specific accounts, usually designated and authorized under education or municipal law with very specific purposes. I think it's very important. This actually comes from the comptroller. I mean, do these reserves fit within the complement of our long-range financial plan? And again, in the coming months, as Dr. Timms and I finalize our long-range financial plan, you're going to begin to see how important this is. I think it's important that the board review our funds. So we typically do that in May. So that, again, you guys can look forward to that presentation. And ultimately, is it in the best interest of our taxpayers? So again, how are our reserve funds funded? It's really when you have a surplus at the end of the year. And I really want to focus on it's an excess or deficiency of revenue over expense. So you guys know each month I share with you, listen, let's use simpler numbers. We have a $12 million budget on the expense side, okay? On the revenue side, we anticipate getting $10 million, but we're going to have to use $2 million in savings. So if we get $11 million, that means I'm plus $1 million to the good, right? On the revenue side. If we underspend our budget 11.5, that's good too, right? Because we're 500,000 under. But the fact of the matter is, we still haven't gotten to that 2 million. Okay. I know you guys know this, but I just want to emphasize that. I think this was a slide that I thought our budget focus group thought was helpful. Again, just shared with you, fund balance reserves is an excess or deficiency of revenue over expense. You can see how close our revenues and expenditures are. So what does that mean? We're not generating a large surplus to help fund some of those reserves.
Hey, Rick?
Yep.
What percent of the reserve that we're planning on spending will be replenished?
Are you talking about for this year?
So where's the X amount of dollars in reserve funds to balance the budget? Well, we're gonna get reserve funds.
Can you know what, can you hold on that? Because there's actually slides on here that I think may help with that. And then let's circle back, Dave, okay? Because it is a great lead into this question. So at the end of the year, yeah, nice job. I didn't even plant that. At the end of this is what we typically see at the end of the year. So we had our beginning balance in 1920. Once the auditors are complete with our audit, we reflect what the revenue was, which quite honestly is interest for the most part. Then we take a look at, okay, what our expenditures are. Now, we do this specifically because of the state comptroller's audit. So we allocate in our budget certain funds to be used towards certain reserves, and we just like to show that we're using them. So we identify that in expenditure. And then what we do is there's surplus at the end of the year. We're able, so in other words, we had more revenue than expense. So we really didn't need to use these reserves. We didn't really need to show that. We show that specifically because that's what the state comptrollers are sharing with us, and it's part of our transparency. So at the end of the day, we were able to replenish those reserves. So now we take the current year, 2021, and you can see that our beginning balance was 15.1 million. We've budgeted a little over 2 million for this year, okay? I've shared with you at the last board meeting during the financial report that at that point in time, we were projecting a surplus of $277,000, right? So this is what you see if we had to use these. So in other words, if our budget was more than what we got in revenue, we would have to tap in to these particular reserves. And that's what this is showing. And then this is what we've identified so that at the end of 21-22, if we had to tap into those reserves, we'd have $11.6 million in those reserves. But what I'm sharing is that I think we're going to have a surplus this year. So I've short-circuited what you saw earlier. We're going to attribute 25,000 to the unemployment reserve. I show that because we typically don't replenish that. Okay. Because we're having a surplus, now all I'm doing is showing the anticipated use to balance our budget. So instead of 11.6, it's probably more realistic that our fund balance in reserves is going to be about 13.7. So Dave, does that help clarify or just confuse the issue?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Rick, I just have one quick question.
Yep.
So on that slide right there, reserve fund balance at the beginning of 2021, it was 15.1.
Yep.
You go back to slide 24, gives a different number.
Where? I'm sorry.
Back one more. Slide 24 on my screen. Actually, back one more. It's the chart. It's the graph with the two lines that are closely, it shows how closely revenue right there.
Oh, this?
Yeah, so I guess what's the difference in that 2020 number in?
This is showing a lot more. I'm just showing reserves. So you've got non-spendable, you've got encumbrances, you've got unappropriated to 4% unappropriated.
Okay, so that's fund balance encompassing all the different funds, and this is just reserves on the next. Slide.
Correct. Yeah. It's a great catch, Mike. Great catch. I'm just thankful I had the answer.
How did you catch that?
Okay, so I shared with you that what we're presenting to the community is what they vote on, and that's the spending plan. But I think we know what most people want to know is what's happening to our taxes. So this hasn't changed. I've interpreted from what I heard from the board that you were very comfortable going out with a maximum allowable levy limit. That being said, there it is. This is my estimate of estimated growth. Obviously, if those come in better than projected, these rates are going to change. So this is an estimate.
What's the equalization rate? That is something you come up with? Is that something that town criminal comes up with, or is that something that's state?
The state. So again, what happens is the assessors go out and they put a value on your home. Okay, at that point in time, they feel it's what the market is dictating. Okay. You have certain counties or districts or areas that maybe they reassess one year and another town didn't. And then in the following year, that town did and another town didn't. So for that town that didn't, if the following year, the state comes in and says, you know what, listen, your houses are selling at a much greater rate or a much higher rate than what you've assessed them for, they equalize it. And that's what this is doing. And that's in part what they're trying to do is they're trying. So if one town, if their market value is 100%, they're paying what is, you know, a true reflection of their home value. But if another town is lower, then they're not really paying a true value of that market. So they equalize it so that we come up with a market value. And that's what's happening here.
So state drives that number. That was
Correct. Yep. Yep. Probably more than you wanted, but
Is the equalization rate only applied to school taxes or other taxes? Do you know that question? You know that answer?
I don't know. I don't believe it does, but I don't know for sure.
because they're paying right now.
So it just, so it's also county and other taxes?
Yeah, I feel like not that popular.
Yep. Yeah, actually, you know what? If you look at your town and county tax bill, you'll see your assessed value and then you'll see your market value. So the answer is yes. Thank you. Right.
It's there.
Yep. So again, I just want to highlight, we won't know what the final assessments are until July. And that's when the board will adopt what the levy will be based on those. So using this again as an example, I use a $100,000 home for illustrative purposes only. I know Mr. Mike Mayer does not like when I do that because it's not a fair representation, but it's easy math for me. So to his point, this is about an average home across the 4 towns that comprise Spencerport. So you can see, and one of the suggestions from the budget focus group was that they thought it would be helpful if you saw the monthly amount. So again, I added a monthly column to share what that would be. So again, this is an estimate based on what I'm sharing with you tonight and what I think will happen.
You don't have the rate per thousand in the chart. Per thousand assessed. There you are.
I think sometimes, you know, again, we'll get into this, but I think sometimes it's deceiving. Our true value tax rate, which is based on the market value, we're actually going down. Okay, so again, something I don't typically share with the board at this point in time. I think it's important that you understand the concept of the contingent budget. If our budget was voted down the first time, the board has the option of either going out for another vote. And if you did that, that would be June 15th, I believe. Or you could actually adopt a contingent budget right away. Most districts typically will go out, they collate the information as to why it was defeated. You can go out with the same budget, you can go out with a different budget amount. That's up to the Board of Education. But if it's voted down twice, then you're required to accept a contingent budget. I just wanted to share with you the structure of that. So a contingent budget, it includes teacher salaries. I have an asterisk there, although I don't have any thing down there. It's not just teacher salaries. It's typically certificated salaries, teaching assistants, treasurer. So it's somewhat convoluted. An ordinary contingent expense, again, it's the minimum service to provide these 3 items. And it's the board that actually determines what appropriations constitute as ordinary contingent expense. Thankfully, we've not had to go through that process. Thankfully, we won't have to.
June 15th, and then what will be the second, is there a date for that?
No, May 18th is the first vote,
Right.
June 15th is the second.
Okay, so if they get shot down in May, that's one strike. June 2nd, they went through it.
Yes, unless the board wanted to go with a contingent budget first time.
What was our levy last year?
Um,
You can only go through-
39,229 and change.
Sufficient?
39,229, I didn't know the 379.
Yeah, so it's.
It's about $1 million.
It's $1 million. It's.
Yep.
Okay.
So again, part of the contingent budget, another component you have to look at is this administrative cap. And then ultimately, to Mike's point, Mike, I think you should just come up and present next time, because we're talking about the levy. The levy can increase from the current year. So for us, it's about $1 million.
I was more mesmerized by the.
Debbie Downer?
Yeah, yeah.
I just, first of all, Lynette gets credit for the graphics on this. She helped me out big time. And
Oh, you're blaming one now.
no, but I'm just thankful she didn't put my face in there. All right, any questions on contingent budget?
No, sorry for jumping on you.
Nope, I love it. This is what the board is approving tonight, hopefully. Proposition 1 is for us to expend $87,434,885. Proposition 2 is the community allowing us to use $131,500 of our reserve to purchase the lift truck. We have 2 school board members that are terms are due, Mr. Hutton and Mr. Maselli. Just want to reiterate, Tuesday, May 18th, 6 to 9, district office. I thought this, how many of you were able to listen to the budget focus group? So if you haven't, I suggest that you maybe take an opportunity. I thought the discussion at the end was valuable. And what we did a lot of was discuss some of these key talking or communication points that Cabinet and Lynette will be working on as we present or create our community presentation, talking about the impact of COVID-19, highlighting the instructional value and accomplishments that we've occurred throughout this year. And quite honestly, I mean, I think it is pretty incredible what we've done. Looking at talking about the equalization rate, talking about the tax rate, it was suggested that we show a tax rate history to show where we are historically, to show where we are within the county. Talk a little bit about the contingent budget and how that may harm school districts. Really talk about the federal stimulus. I think the consensus of the communities is that school districts are flush with cash. Well, as you know, there's strings attached to those cash. Talk about what happened within the state budget and anything else that we determine or come across that we think are valuable, that's going to help share knowledge about our budget. So with that, I apologize for maybe taking a little bit too long, but I thought these things were important, more so this year than in the past. And I'll leave it up to you guys to any questions. If the board wants to, I don't know, take a question from the audience, looks like Mr.
I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, during the discussion groups, over 60% of the homes are in the 2 parts that are increasing anywhere from $140 to $190. Okay, that's 60% of the homes. Really, I do not envy trying to put together the pamphlet that's going to go out for the budget, because people, that equalization rate, let's be honest, who can really explain it to the common person what it means? Because homes in Ogden went up 2 years ago, and you're telling us that in Ogden it's below, that it may be changed more. And the second point is that a year ago, 2 years ago, 800 people voted in this budget. 300 no, 500 yes. Last year, 1,400 people voted no. Agreed, 2,400 voted yes. Which group is going to come out to vote in person? I don't know, but I'm concerned that the 1,400 people that voted no, with what's happened with the economy, they're gonna have concerns, and I don't know how we can answer them. We brought that up in the committee, how to do it, to make it, we tried to go monthly, because, I mean, let's be honest, if you own a $250,000 home, which isn't on the site, you're gonna be paying $250 more a month or a year. And, that number is staggering, considering how many people might have jobs or still laid off. So just something, I don't know how to put it in the cornerstone to explain. It's a good budget, don't get me wrong. I'm voting yes. Okay? But I really have, I'm worried about who's going to come out the vote. Is it the 800 or is it the 4,000?
Thanks, Mike. Okay, you don't have any other questions?
So, Mike, I appreciate that input, and especially at the tail end. There was a lot of effort from a lot of people, and those that were on the committee, I really appreciate it. A lot of legwork went in, a lot of information was shared, and I think that's where we need to go. We need to really work on getting it out that, okay, a lot of people looked at this, and this is a good budget. We are doing the right thing for our district and for our students. And that's what we have to remind the voters that is in the best interest of the district. So when it comes to the equalization rate, that I don't want to just say, well, it's the state, we're stuck with that. It is an issue that we're going to have to really educate people on. Now, I'm looking at my town, and it looks like I'm going down. But what happened was the value of my home last year went up $40,000. So the net difference, I'm paying more. So it's so one of the things that number is so misleading, because they did reassess the town gates and all the values went up. So yes, that number that looked there is one thing, and that is going to be a difficult thing. How do we convince everyone? How do we share that okay, I'm in the town gates, I'm getting a great benefit from this budget. Well, I'm still paying more. So it's going to be a tough thing. But what I really wanted to do was for anyone who's still online, that was on the budget focus group, and those that are here, wow, you guys did a lot of work, and we really appreciate the input that you had and you shared over these last grueling weeks. So thank you all, and thank everyone that's online. So thank you so much. With that, we have a motion or anything else?
One more question.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm talking about more of future testing. So the Amazon warehouse in Rochester Park has been delayed. They say they're working around May 1st. What do you know? Have they been approached for a pilot, or do we know anything?
They had a general public meeting, which honestly, Mike didn't provide any information. I don't know much about it at all, other than I know that at some point in time, it's going to impact us on the tax cap. In one year, it's going to be very good. In the other year, it's not. What's interesting, and I think as we get into the long-range financial analysis, and back in I think February, when I tried to do that forecasting of the tax cap, it's been interesting to see, because pilots and the exclusion, your debt service, are the two areas that are impacted by that exclusion. So we know our pilots are decreasing without Amazon. We know that our debt service is also decreasing. So honestly, our tax levy increase is hovering around 2 to 2.5. So the question becomes, and it's out of our control on the pilots, when that hits, what's that going to do? And then how do we adjust, especially in our debt service?
Yeah, this is just a capology question. We know that's coming, so we know we can offset the debt service. Maybe we should start finding it.
Lengthy conversation with Dr. Timpson.
Thank you. We have it.
So Rick, do you have in future another meeting with us and Dr. Timmons to
I'm going to be talking with Dr. Kissel at the next time we meet to talk about how we want to move forward with that.
Okay. We have a motion. Mr. Bracken. So the motion is to accept the proposed interim superintendent's budget and proposition one. So number one, Mr. Bracken, number two, Mr. Kincaid, all in favor? 7-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. So,
Do another.
Yeah, do the proposition.
Sorry, no, no.
Accept the interim budget, including propositions 1, proposition 2.
so all in favor? No, actually, so seconded, Mr. Maselli, all in favor, 6-0. Mr. Kincaid, step out of the room.
Are you separating the propositions? I'm sorry.
It was a mistake.
Wait, are we going with one vote or two?
We're going with one vote. So I think Bracken, first, made first motion for the corrected, Mr. Maselli was second for the corrected, and vote was 6-0. Thank you. And run again.
With this one, is any questions?
No, no. We're good.
So, motion to accept the property tax report card. Kate. And Mr. Bracken, all in favor? 6-0. Evaluation. Can we get that skirt?
I try to save it.
You guys.
Quick, budget, I know it's tough, but we.
That was one of the reductions we had.
I don't want a library rug before we do
Yeah,
that.
Dave needs a rug.
Yeah, library rug before the curtains. So maybe we have meetings without the curtains, and so it can be sure.
It's just,
Dave touched it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
whatever the-
Okay, so motion to adjourn. Mr. Bracken, Mr. Maselli, second. All in favor? 6-0. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.